around the words alive and not alive all the time. But have you ever stopped to think about what that actually means? Well, today we're going to dive into the fundamental rulebook that every single living thing on this planet has to follow. I mean, take a look at this. A rock and a rabbit. Pretty easy to tell the difference, right? One just sits there and the other's, well, a rabbit. But what's the real difference? Deep down, what are the actual rules that draw that line in the sand between life and not life? Well, it all comes down to this. They follow the rules of life. And that rabbit, it's not alone. Everything from the smallest microbe you can't even see to the biggest tree in the forest, they all play by the same basic rule book. Scientists call these rules life processes. So what are these processes? They're basically the non-negotiable jobs every living thing has to do just to stay in the game. To survive, to grow. We're going to break down the 4 big ones: how things get food, how they use that food for energy, how they ship supplies around, and of course, how they take out the trash. All right, so let's start our journey at the ultimate source of pretty much all energy on Earth. How does pure sunlight get turned into the fuel that powers, well, everything? It all kicks off with plants. Okay, so when it comes to getting food, life basically has 2 game plans. You've got your do-it-yourselfers, the autotrophs. Think of them as the chefs of the world, like plants making their own meals from scratch. And then you have everyone else, the heterotrophs. That's us, that's the rabbit. We're the customers. We have to get our food by eating other living things. And that special recipe plants use, it's called photosynthesis, and honestly, it might just be the most important chemical reaction on the entire planet. It's incredible. They take some basic ingredients, carbon dioxide from the air, water from the ground, add a little sunlight, and bam, they create a type of sugar called glucose. That's their food, their fuel. But it's not just one magic trick. It's a super precise 4-step operation. First, a green pigment called chlorophyll grabs onto sunlight. Second, that light energy gets transformed into chemical energy, kind of like charging a battery. Third, water molecules get split apart. And guess what? That releases the oxygen we all need to breathe. And finally, the plant uses that stored chemical energy to whip carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. That's the food, the final product. Okay, so the plants have done their job, they've made the food. Now what about us? How do we take that food and actually turn it into something useful? Well, that whole adventure begins with the very first bite. For critters like us, our way of eating is called holozoic nutrition. And you can think of it like a 5-station factory assembly line. First up, ingestion. That's just getting the food in. Then, digestion, breaking it all down. Third, absorption, getting the good stuff into our system. Fourth, assimilation, where our cells actually put those nutrients to work. And last, egestion, getting rid of whatever couldn't be used. And that whole breakdown process, it starts the second food hits your mouth. Seriously, your teeth kick off the mechanical part, the mashing and grinding. But at the exact same time, an enzyme in your spit called amylase is already starting the chemical attack on starches. So yeah, you're literally starting to digest that burger bun before it even goes down your throat. From there, it's down to the stomach. And let me tell you, the stomach is a pretty intense place. It's basically an acid bath, thanks to hydrochloric acid. This acid flips the switch on an enzyme called pepsin, which is a protein digesting machine. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't the stomach just digest itself? Well, it's got a clever trick, a thick lining of mucus that keeps it safe from its own acid. But really, the main event, the real show, happens in the small intestine. This is where the final breakdown of food occurs and where all those nutrients get absorbed. You've got bile coming in to handle the fats, other juices for everything else, and the walls in there are incredible. They're covered in millions of these tiny finger-like things called villi. Their whole job is to increase the surface area for absorption. And get this, if you could somehow iron out all those folds, it would cover an entire tennis court. All of that is just to make sure we soak up every last bit of goodness into our blood. Okay, so we've got the fuel. It's been absorbed into the bloodstream. Great, but now what? How does that fuel get from our gut to, say, a muscle cell in your big toe? For that, you need a seriously amazing delivery service. And that delivery system, of course, is our blood. And blood is way more than just red stuff. As you can see here, more than half of it is a yellowish liquid called plasma. Then you've got the red blood cells making up almost the other half. Think of these as the tiny oxygen delivery trucks. And that last little 1%, that's your security team, the white blood cells fighting off invaders and the platelets ready to patch up any leaks.
So this blood is constantly moving through this huge network of highways. And there's an easy way to remember the main roads. Arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Veins, on the other hand, bring it all back. And what connects them? These teeny tiny little side streets called capillaries. That's where the real action happens, where oxygen and nutrients are dropped off to every single cell in your body.
Okay, so the glucose delivery has been made. It's at the cell's front door. But the energy is still locked inside. The final crucial step is to unlock it. And that happens through a process called cellular respiration. This is it. This is the moment where our cells take that glucose, combine it with oxygen, and basically burn it to release energy. The energy that lets you think, move, live, everything. This is why we have to breathe.
Now, this is a super common mix-up, so let's be clear. Breathing and respiration are not the same thing. Breathing is just the mechanics, right? The physical act of pulling air into your lungs and pushing it out. Respiration, that's the chemical reaction happening inside billions of your cells to make energy. So to put it simply, you breathe so that you can respire. And what's really cool is that our cells have a plan A and a plan B for this. Plan A is aerobic respiration. That's the main gig. It uses oxygen, it's super efficient, and it gives you a ton of energy. But what happens when you're sprinting and you can't get enough oxygen to your muscles? They switch to plan B, anaerobic respiration. It doesn't need oxygen, but it's way less efficient, and it has a byproduct, lactic acid. And yep, that's the stuff that makes your muscles scream during a tough workout. Think about it. Any factory that's burning fuel is going to produce some exhaust, some waste. And our body's cells, our little energy factories, are no exception. All these chemical reactions create byproducts. So how does the body take out the trash?
Well, that cleanup crew has a name, excretion. This is the absolutely critical job of filtering out all the metabolic waste, stuff like urea, from our blood. And it's not just about being tidy. If that junk were allowed to just pile up, it would become poisonous, fast.
And the stars of this cleanup operation are your kidneys. These things are incredible. They're the body's master filters, and they process your entire blood supply hundreds of times every single day. Inside each kidney, you've got millions of tiny filtering units called nephrons, and they work in 3 steps. First, filtration. They yank all the waste and water out of the blood. But wait, we don't want to lose the good stuff. So second is reabsorption. The body pulls back any useful things like water and glucose. And finally, secretion. Any last little bits of trash are added to the mix. And what's left is urine, ready to be removed.
So when you take a step back and look at the big picture, you realize these 4 things, nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion, they aren't separate jobs. They're a perfectly coordinated symphony. You can't get energy without getting food and delivering it, and none of that works if you don't clean up the mess afterwards. It's one single, beautifully interconnected system. And that is what life is all about.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question. If these 4 processes are the official blueprint for life on Earth, what do we do with things that, well, blur the lines? Think about a virus. It can't do any of this on its own. It has to hijack a cell. Or what about advanced AI? It can process energy, sure, but it doesn't follow any of these biological rules. So, are they alive? It really